Look at that one.
Well, a warm welcome, everyone. We probably had that in services as well. Very warm welcome. Great to gather for the second, part 2, of this seminar series after the evening services, which we've called Let's Talk About Porn. It's very good to be back together, those of us who are in the room. Also encouraged that a number of people have engaged online. There may be people watching the live stream now. You're very welcome online as well as people offline in the room. My name is Henry. I'm on the staff here. And this is Kate,
Hello.
who is new to us. Kate, could you introduce yourself this
Yeah,
evening?
hi, my name's Kate. I work for an organisation called the Naked Truth Project.
Brilliant. Well, last week we spent time in the first of our sessions thinking about the Bible's teaching on the slavery of pornography and the wonderful liberating hope of Jesus. And we thought about the freedom that he offers from not just the guilt of pornography, but the grip of it. He doesn't just say, you are forgiven at the cross. Wonderfully, he gives us his Spirit so that real change is possible. And that is a wonderful hope, part of the Christian gospel of freedom. This week, as we've advertised, as we've thought about, Kate is very kindly going to come in, is here rather, from the Naked Truth charity, to talk specifically about recovery from the struggles with pornography, perhaps addiction to it, also thinking about how parents can help raising children and perhaps teenagers in particular. And also, I think, Kate, you're going to touch on how partners can help each other within marriage. Hopefully, maybe,
yes.
We'll see, yes, at some point. As last week, we'll spend the first part of our time being recorded on the live stream. And then we'll have some time towards the end. We'll leave a section at the end for Q&A, for question and answer. Which Kate is going to introduce with some clever software called Mentimeter. She'll say more about that in a minute. That bit will be off live stream. So just so people are aware, to hopefully help people to be as frank as they'd like to be in terms of questions to ask. We are planning to finish by 8:45 so we can get home on our warm Sunday evening. There will be an opportunity at the end, as we've thought about, to respond in song and with prayer ministry. Very grateful for people coming in to help with that. Let's pray as we begin. And we'll start with a verse from John chapter 8, which we are spending time in last week. Jesus replied, "Very truly I tell you, everyone who sins is a slave to sin. But if the Son sets you free, you will be free indeed." Lord Jesus, we thank you for the reminder that we thought about last week, that you really hate sin. You hate the way that it damages us, the way that it takes people away from your loving care, your salvation, all your goodness. And therefore we know that you hate pornography, all its ill effects. And we pray that you would help us this evening. Again, we ask for your light and your hope and your freedom as we consider how you view this, how you can help us, how you love us in it. And we pray that it would be really helpful and encouraging and inspiring for those people who are struggling with this particular area. Thank you so much for Kate coming in, her expertise, her wisdom, her love for you, and her love for people. Please would you give her particular grace as she speaks and helps us with this. We ask in your precious name. Amen.
Amen.
Kate.
Thank you. Well, if you're on the live stream, you can still... Oh, my slides have gone. There we go. You can still log in to menti.com. And the code is up the top there. So anytime there's an interactive slide, you'll still be able to log it in. I can see that 3 of you have, a couple more getting on with it. Fantastic, thank you. We'll see how we go. I may abandon the tech as time goes on, or I may stick with it. We'll see how we do. Okay. So as I said, I work for an organisation called the Naked Truth Project. And we're going to start by watching Naked Truth's manifesto. Here we go.
Of treating humanity as a gift. We tell them there's a better way.
Oh, I'm going to start again, see what happens.
When they ask us why we stand for this and resist the demand of a system that insists we dilute our standards of treating humanity as a gift, we tell them there's a better way. We found the path of grace that led us from our grave, and we opened up our hearts again. We tell them that we've seen too much. That destructive yet seductive touch that pulled us from the path of love to the desolate wastelands of lust, driving families and marriages and our own sanity to the dust. We tell them that it ain't worth the cost, that instant gratification always comes at the loss of a sustained satisfaction that shortcuts can't cross. We tell them that minds are held hostage, surrounded by a montage of images that sabotage childhood innocence, and in the search for affection and significance are riddled with cynicism and indifference. We tell them people make a profit from the losses of others, objectified, coerced, and uncovered. We tell them however you brand it, however you bottle it, poison will always be poison, no matter how you normalize and offer it. But there is another story. We have heard a sweeter song, bearing witness to pieces of art restored back to their original glory, with places to belong, open eyes and free lives. We have a vision that we can't unsee, where people believe they're worthy of being loved, and they live with an indestructible peace. There is an incorruptible seed buried beneath the soil of our lives that we nourish and feed. And though we bear scars, we are marked but not defined. There is hope in new stars. Light shines in the dark and it will not be overcome. And so it is with us, restored and wholehearted. We're sharing the naked truth about porn. And we're just getting started.
We work in 2 ways. We call it upstream and downstream. So upstream, we work in education and with parents, trying to educate people around pornography, trying to help people see what's actually going on. And we work downstream, so we work in recovery, both with partners and with users. So the charity covers all of those. Henry, can I just ask you to read Isaiah 61?
We may have it on the ProPresenter as well. Thank you, Sandy. So this is Isaiah 61. Starting from verse 1. The Spirit of the Sovereign Lord is on me, because the Lord has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim freedom for the captives, and release from darkness for the prisoners, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favour and the day of vengeance of our God, to comfort all who mourn, and provide for those who grieve in Zion, to bestow on them a crown of beauty instead of ashes, the oil of joy instead of mourning, and a garment of praise instead of a spirit of despair. They will be called oaks of righteousness, a planting of the Lord for the display of his splendour.
Thank you. Just to get the hang of Mentimeter, can somebody guess for me how many hits one porn site got in March? Just verbally, just give me a number. Can somebody give me a number verbally? Just a guess. 500,000. Now we're going to play Mentimeter. Can we play higher and lower? Do you think it's more than 500,000? Do you think it's less than 500,000? Can you do it on there? Just to get the hang of it, because it's kind of fun. Okay. Thank you. Right then. In March 2026, one porn site got 4.26 billion hits. So just to put that into context, TikTok at the same time got 2.5 billion. So I'm assuming, am I right in assuming that most of you were here last week? Yeah? Okay, most of you. So, because last week, Henry did a really good job of kind of sorting you all out with the facts and what's going on. So I'm expecting to do a really quick trip through here. Obviously, pornography has a massive impact on our society. I think one of the things that has been a real issue is that these last two stats here, where it was found that 88 scenes in popular porn videos contain physical aggression, and that 94% of the physical aggression in these videos were directed against a woman. The absolute kicker in that piece of research was that in almost all cases, the woman's reaction was always either neutral or positive, never negative. So what that does is it resets somebody's brain. It resets somebody's brain, especially if they're young, to thinking about what they're expecting. It becomes a bit of an issue. And it's not just outside the church. I think Henry mentioned last week that the Barna report in 2024 said that 75% of Christian men and 40% of Christian women say that they watch porn on some level. And it's not just the Americans. At a recent church event in the UK, it was found this was a response to one of our polls. And so that's 25% of people at that event consuming porn in the last week. And it's quite an issue, it's out there, and we need to face it and we need to deal with it. But we don't need to run away and we don't need to worry. You might be saying, well, what is pornography? And I think Henry did quite a good job with this last week, but just to recap. Pornography refers to books, pictures, and films that are designed to cause sexual excitement by showing or describing sexual acts. And sometimes we presume that pornography is just photos and videos, but it could be books, it could be cartoons, it can even be audio only these days, which, is a little bit interesting. So we can't just think about one genre, we need to think wider. So, when did you last view porn? Vote, please. If you are watching on the live stream and you are actually live, you can join in and vote too. The Mentimeter code's at the top there. It's a bit funny when there's not very many of us. See how this goes. Thank you. Right then. That chunk that Henry read to us from Isaiah ends with, they will be called oaks of righteousness. So no matter what choices we've made, no matter what we've done, Jesus stood up in the temple at the beginning of his ministry and quoted from that passage and said, today it's fulfilled in your hearing. That actually he came to give us hope. So we don't need to panic and we don't need to worry. Thank you for those. Oh, there we go. I'm going to go through a biblical framework that can help us think about responding to pornography, can help us think about how we might approach this and what we might do. Now, I'm sure that you all know the story of Esau and Jacob. Yeah, some of you? Okay. I think you'll remember that Esau and Jacob were twins. Esau was born first, and Jacob was born second, and they were very, very, very different. Esau was hairy and hunted and was, strong and ran around after things, and Jacob was more of a stay-at-home lad. The thing about Jacob is he had a slightly negative name, deceiver, which, is non-ideal. And one day, Esau went out hunting. And when he came home, he was hungry, really, really hungry. And as he came into the tent, he realized that Jacob had been cooking, and Jacob had cooked stew. And he said, "Oh, can I have some stew?" Jacob, at this point, thought, "I know, I'll get ahead here." And he said, "Yeah, you can have stew, but only if you give me your birthright." Well, hang on, that was a big deal. I don't know if you know the background to this, but getting his birthright meant that when his dad's possessions were sold, they would be split into 3, and the person with the birthright would get 2 portions. It also meant that when his dad died, the person with the birthright would become head of the household. It also, they believed, meant that that person would get a blessing. Well, hang on, that's quite a big deal to swap for soup, isn't it? But Esau was hungry, and he said, "All right then." He swapped his birthright for soup. And we might be thinking, what? That makes no sense at all. Why would you do that? And if you think about it, he was swapping something he could see in front of him for something that was a long way off. And we do that, don't we? So your soup might be porn, but your soup might be something else. Your soup might be all sorts of things. But let's think that through. Time and time again, we swap a future that could be fantastic for an immediate thing that we want, and we want it right now. That can be difficult, can't it? There's all sorts of times that can be a problem. And thinking about holiness, issues around holiness, are they sometimes woven in? Are they sometimes with ideas of forgetfulness? The Bible time and time and time again says, remember, remember, remember. And I think that's because we're inclined to forget. We're inclined to forget what God has said, and we're inclined to forget what is valuable. Sometimes we forget whose we are and who we are, and we start trading. Esau forgot. He forgot when he was vulnerable that he was valuable. And that happens to us in lots of different ways. There's 4 things I want to go through. I want to go through heart, mouth, eyes, and feet. And we're going to use another verse from the Bible to help us with this. So Proverbs 4:23-27 says, "Guard your heart above all else, for it determines the course of your life." We'll get through the whole lot in a minute, but we're going to start with guard your heart above all else, for it determines the course of your life. Now, guard your heart. They're funny, aren't they? So, one is a bodyguard and one is a prison guard. And I'm going to explain where I'm going with this. If we're going to guard our heart, we need to guard it externally and internally. So first of all, guarding your heart is like a bodyguard. So if you think about it, Bodyguards work the hardest at certain times and places. When the VIP or whoever they're guarding is sitting at home with their feet up, they're not working very hard, are they? But the times, if you think about presidents in America, the times when they're moving between a building and a vehicle, they're all on high alert, aren't they? The times when they're moving into different spaces, especially unexpected spaces, the bodyguards are all on high alert. And that's the same thing with us guarding our hearts, is there can be certain times and places where we're more vulnerable than others. So, back onto Mentimeter, just for fun. What are certain times and places when you or somebody else might be vulnerable? And it doesn't matter what your soup is. So you might be thinking, well, I don't feel vulnerable to pornography. That's okay. Whatever your stew is, go with that. Because, I don't find myself particularly tempted to eat bars of dairy milk at 8:30 in the morning. Don't know about you, not a problem. 8:30 in the evening, we might have a different issue. So that's where a time thing matters for me. So yeah, just have a think. Yeah, it's a biggie. Yeah. So there's all sorts of different times and places where we can think, where we might be more vulnerable. And you won't be surprised to hear that these are pretty much the same absolutely everywhere, that humans are humans, and that, you're far more likely to reach out to something to comfort you when you have had an argument with somebody, or you're feeling stressed, or you are feeling alone. All of those kind of things. Thank you for that. Oh. Why aren't I going for... Oh, there we are. Then we get to the prison guard. So the bodyguard's looking out, but the prison guard is guarding what's inside, is guarding the inmate. And our hearts, sometimes we need protecting from our own hearts. Our hearts can get deceitful. Our hearts can lead us in the wrong way. Our hearts can tell us things that aren't true. And that can get tricky, can't it? That can get difficult. So if you think about it, sometimes there's all sorts of emotions that we can go through where sometimes we need protection. We need to not go those ways. So, thinking about whatever your stew is, can you think through which ones of these might be your trigger? Are you more likely to look for something to comfort you, or to look for something when you're bored, when you're angry, when you're frustrated, when you feel overlooked, when you feel disappointed? Alone is often a massive one. Thank you. I just tell you, I really enjoy the way these things move up and down. It's kind of fun. And whatever our stew is, working out when, times, places, and working out what our triggers are, they're the things that are going to help. I know at home that when I am very, very tired, I am going to crave carbs. And sometimes I can eat my way through most of the kitchen before I realize what I should have done is have a nap. So sometimes it's worth working out what your trigger is in advance so that you can think through how you are going to deal with it. So I've learnt that when I'm extremely tired, what I have to do is walk out of the kitchen and walk somewhere else and lie down. And then it works really, really nicely. Thank you for those. So that's guarding our heart. Now, the next bit is to guard our mouths. Avoid all perverse talk. Stay away from corrupt speech. Thing is, it's not just other people's talk or maybe the content of the conversation. Sometimes it's the things we say to ourselves. Driving down the M40 on the way here, I set my cruise control, because otherwise it is really easy, isn't it, to, stick your foot down and find that you're breaking the law. And it's quite easy to excuse that in your head. That thing, it's important that I get there. It's really important that I get there on time. So we maximize the impact this is going to have. We say it's really, really important. And we minimize the impact that it might have. So we maximize what's in front of us, and we minimize what's long term. Esau maximized how much he wanted the stew, and he minimized thinking about the long-term effect. If I wasn't using cruise control coming down the M40, I might think it's really important I get there really, really quickly, and I might not think about the impact of what speeding could do. I might not think about the implications. I might not think that I would be breaking the law, using more fuel, or putting other people in danger. So when it comes to thinking around porn use, it's really easy to think, well, this is what I want now, and not think about the long-term implications, what's actually going on. And we use all sorts of things to say to ourselves, don't we? We use all sorts of different things to tell ourselves lies. So, when I'm thinking about driving, I might say, it's important I get there. Oh, it doesn't really matter. It's just a couple of miles an hour. So I'd like to know, which ones of these, with your particular stew, do you think that you say most? Because we all do it, don't we? In all sorts of ways, in all sorts of areas. We might know something's wrong or maybe not ideal, and yet we choose time and time again to just say things to ourselves. We might say, it's not my fault. I deserve this. That might be back to the dairy milk. It's not as bad as doing 85 miles an hour. We might say, I couldn't help it. I was sad. Might say, I'm going to mess up anyway, so what's the point trying to change? So which ones do you think with your particular soup that you might use? That helpless cry of "it's not my fault" is heard all over the place. And yet, with getting free from things like pornography, it's as we take responsibility, it's as we take ownership, as we start to actually take responsibility, that we can change things, we can make things different. Thank you for those. That's fun. You see, back to Esau and his stew, he wasn't really going to die, was he? I'll die if I don't have some now, it's worth my birthright. No, it's not. He was just going to be angry for a bit longer. Hungry for a little bit longer. But he's not actually going to die. But we say all sorts of things to ourselves to excuse ourselves and to just shift responsibility. You see, behind every self-defeating act in our lives is a lie we've believed. Either we've lied to ourselves or we've believed one of Satan's lies. And that happens time and time and time again. Romans 25, says they exchanged the truth of God for a lie. And then they worshipped created things rather than the Creator. But we do that all the time with all sorts of different things. It's one of the It's one of the big things we fall for, whether it's in the area of pornography or something else. If you think about it, it starts off right back in the Garden of Eden, right back there, when Satan came to Eve and said, oh, did God really say? That question mark, that questioning God's goodness, that questioning his care. And what we do time and time again is we fall for those lies. So when it comes to getting rid of things, we need to recognize the lie. So if we think about me and eating carbs instead of going to sleep, the lie is that dairy milk will make me less tired. Okay, that's a lie. It's not true. But it's a lie I fall for quite regularly. If I call out the lie and say, actually, that is a lie, and replace it with the truth of, I need to sleep and not eat dairy milk, that's the truth. And I think we need to do that when we think through issues around all sorts of areas of our lives, and especially the lies that we believe about God. We need to call out the lie. We need to replace it with truth, because that's how we change those things in our lives. You see, Esau forgot what was valuable. He forgot that a birthright is huge. He forgot that he was going to get money, that he was going to get position and power, and he forgot that he was going to get a blessing. And he listened to the lie, excuse me, that his stomach said. He listened to the lie, I need food and I need it now. So, our next one is look straight ahead. Fix your eyes on what lies before you. And this is part of that part of our manifesto where we talk about looking forwards. Because it's not just about what we leave behind when it comes to pornography or anything else. When we talk about recovery, we're not just kind of saying, oh, we need to stop this. The why and what we want and where we're heading, they're really important. They're massive. Why do we want to stop? What are we heading for? What are we running towards? What are we made for? These are all really lovely questions. And it stops it being about just stopping something and about moving forwards. So, bit of a personal question, but I'm on a roll. What's God called you to? So what's your vision? What's your future? What do you want? I think this is a free-form question on Menti. Just go for it. What has God called you to? Every time I ask him this question, he tells me that he's called me to be Kate, which I quite like. It's completely, it doesn't tell me anything at all, really. But, so that's what I'm called to. I'm called to be the best Kate I can be. Thank you. I always like these. And when we think through these things, when we think through they're our goals, they're what's important to us, they're kind of like our birthright, aren't they? They're the thing that we're called to. They're the thing that's important. And when we think about our why, it's easier to put down the soup because it's just soup. It's easier to put those things aside. Thank you for those. Because actually the massive thing that God has called us to is to be like Jesus, isn't it? That gradually through our lives, we become more and more like him by following him as our pattern, by making all of those tiny choices. So if we're going to mark out straight paths for our feet and stay on the same path, don't get sidetracked and keep our feet from following evil. And that's about the path that we choose to go on. What path leads where? So if those things that we had on the last slide are the things that God has called you to, what's your path? What are the choices you're going to make every day to prioritize those things? Because if you think about it, it's not about being perfect in the first 2 minutes. Even in a general election, nobody wins by getting 100% of the votes, do they? They just have to get most of them. And in the same way, if day after day after day, we can make most of the right choices to head in a certain direction, we will go that way. So we don't have to give up if it's not 100% perfect right in the first instance. As time goes on, we will go down the right path, nice and slowly. Now, excuse me, I seem to have a bit of a frog in my throat this evening. At the Naked Truth Project, we have a couple of recovery options. The thing is, Jesus sets us free from stuff. We know that, don't we? Yeah? We know that we pray, we get set free from things. But time and time again, sometimes we need to work that out and walk that out. I was thinking while I was preparing this about Lazarus. There's a lady called Helly Blunt, lives in Cheltenham, and she always says that when Lazarus was called out of the grave, do you all know about him? Yeah? Okay. So when Lazarus was called out of the grave, Jesus shouts, "Lazarus, come out!" And Lazarus, comes out. But the thing Jesus says to the people there next are, take the grave clothes off him. Because he still had his grave clothes on when he wandered out. And I think sometimes that's what it's like. That, be it pornography or be it something else, we can pray, we can be forgiven, and then sometimes we need to walk these things out. And sometimes we need a community to help get the grave clothes off. So at the Naked Truth Project, we have 2 things that can be helpful. The first one is a video on-demand course called Control Alt Delete. It's free, it's just an app, you just download it and work through it. You can work through it on your own, you can find a friend, you can find a couple of mates, whatever works. But that can really help you just start to think through all of those things we've been through this evening and some others. And it's all trendy and videos and fun. We also run courses called Click to Kick. These are free. We do ask for a donation, but sort of halfway down the course. And it's not pressure before you start, but it is there. Click to Kick is an 8-week online support group. So you meet with a whole load of other people who are in exactly the same position as you, doing exactly the same things. And you support one another. Lots and lots of questions we talk about facing it and fighting it. So there's lots and lots of things in there where people just work through it together. They set up a group and they have a group of people to support them. A group of people where during the week they can say, I'm feeling really tempted now. I'm feeling really stressed. And the group can step in. I run a ladies' recovery group. Do you know that 40% of those in the UK consuming pornography are women? Yeah? So it's not just a bloke's issue. It's a women's issue as well. And I've been surprised how many of the women that I've had in my group are Christians and absolutely love Jesus and are desperately doing their best to follow him. And yet they need a little bit of help in this area. And it's lovely watching them bond as a group and watching them work this out and walk this out together. Okay. So that is probably the end of my users bit. How am I doing? Ooh, should talk quicker. Okay. We will have we'll have some time for questions at the end. So, partners and spouses. I found this statistic really shocking when I first started working for the Naked Truth Project. Do you know that 79% of the partners of porn users meet the diagnostic criteria of PTSD? That's huge. So that means that lots of these people, by the way, I'm going to use some gendered language. I'm probably going to talk about men and women a little bit, but obviously with the rates of which women are using porn, some partners are obviously male, goes around both ways, but I might just use gendered language a little bit. So a lot of people find that they don't understand what's happening to them. They might feel crazy, they might feel just a bit, like, I just don't know where I am, I don't know what's going on. They might have trouble managing their emotions, feeling sad and angry and numb and anxious. They might be having trouble physically, feeling tired, losing weight. Think about it. In a church context, let's go with the gendered way around. If a bloke comes forward, says he's had a porn addiction, and comes forward for help, and the church get round him and say, oh, it's fantastic that you've confessed this. We want to support you working this out. This is going to be amazing. And then they might be expecting his partner to be supportive as well. Well, he's been through years, probably, of feeling shame, feeling stressed, feeling like he's hiding. He's got it into the light, he's feeling better, at which point she's been hit with a 10-ton truck. She's going to be spiraling. She's not going to know which way's up. She's going to feel similarly to if he'd had an affair. And if he'd had an affair and admitted it, you wouldn't expect her to show up and say, oh yes, I can support you now. She's going to go through all sorts of emotions. She's going to go through all sorts of hassle. In that context, how can someone feel safe to be sexual in their own relationship? Like, that's going to be hard, isn't it? That's going to be weird, because how do you know what's going through their head and where they've got that from? And so that's going to need some unpicking. Some people end up with a crisis of faith, might find that church or small group doesn't feel safe. That doesn't mean that they don't love Jesus. It just means that it can be hard, and they might need loads of support and loads of help. But it can be so hard to ask for help. If a partner's found something on a computer, are they going to want to mention that? Are they going to carry it on their own? There's all sorts of questions in there. So, do's and don'ts. Please don't say I understand, even if you've been through it yourself. The line is, that must be really hard, okay? No, I understand. No, I went through this myself. Just, that must be really hard. Don't minimize their feelings or impact. Remember, for many partners, this feels like adultery. They need lots of grace for where they are now. Don't rush. It's not like, you've just found out, so now you need to forgive. That's never going to happen, or at least not really. Jesus forgives us no matter what we've done. No matter what we've done, Jesus forgives us time and time again. But our partner could well need some time to think that through. Please don't make it about them, asking them to be more sexual. None of that. Oh, have you tried wearing shorter skirts? Have you tried wearing a bit of makeup? That kind of thing. Because this isn't about sex. That's the one thing that it's not about. That's possibly the only thing that it's definitely not about. And being more available sexually, all of those things aren't actually going to make a difference to the other person's problem. She didn't cause it, she can't control it, and she can't cure it. She's a separate person, and she really can't be in there. So forgiveness is goal, but do be trauma-informed in your language. Please don't suggest the wife becomes an accountability partner. Can you imagine if your partner had an affair and then you were the one that a couple of times a week or a couple of times a month or a couple of times a year, wherever the slips are occurring, that the other person came to you and said, oh, but I really fancy Marjorie, and I'd really like to go and have sex with Marjorie, and I'd really like to go and be with Marjorie. Can you imagine how that would make a partner feel? No. Yeah, they're not the right person to be an accountability partner in a relationship. So they need checking in with separately. If you're helping them as a couple or you're helping them in church, each person needs their own people alongside them. Or even if it's the same person helping both of them, make sure you check in with them separately, not just as a couple. Careful about where signposting. So it might not be time for couples counselling yet. There might be some individual work to do before we can think about putting the relationship back together. And making them feel safe might need professional support. At the Naked Truth Project, we run something called Wholehearted. So we have professionally facilitated online support groups, webinars, small groups. There's information on our website where people can get started. So especially where people are feeling isolated, where there isn't someone to talk to in their own church, then people can get alongside in that kind of way. And there's some real deep friendships that are made through people supporting one another in those contexts. And as I said, it isn't just women. It isn't just blokes consuming porn and women being partners. I was talking to a 17-year-old lad a couple of months ago, and he said that his girlfriend had taken a book that she was reading and had asked him to act out the sex scene in the book. And so we talked about how that made him feel. Because he said, well, it was weird. It wasn't like we weren't doing anything that was in our relationship. I was just being body parts for her to reorganize. And so it does happen the other way around. And it left him feeling as odd as some partners can end up, as some women can end up feeling. So it does happen both ways. Okay, kids. It can be a bit weird, can't it? So this idea of trying to talk to your kids about pornography. I think the thing that really, really matters is that you say something. Yeah, something, anything. The British Board of Film Classification found that 3/4 of parents felt that their child would not have seen pornography online. But of their children, more than half said they had seen it. If you think the stats are now that 10% of 8-year-olds have seen pornography, the average age at which kids are first seeing pornography is around 12, 13. We think, what are we going to do? Because we think it's the kind of thing we'll talk to them about when they're sort of 17, 18. But the horse has bolted a long time before that. So if you think 10% of 8-9-year-olds, that's 3 in a class of 30. How long does that take to get round all the other kids? We do, at The Naked Truth, we do parenting seminars, and I'm going to try and squish a whole chunk of what we normally do in an hour and a half into about 4 minutes. So I'm about to just throw a load of information at you. Often we ask parents, who would you like to talk to your child about pornography? Would you like it to be you? Would you like it to be an educator? Would you like it to be Netflix? Would you like it to be a porn site? Would you like it to be the kid next to them on the bus? And most parents want it to be them or another trusted adult. The thing is, unless you speak, it's going to be one of the others. Because the porn sites, Netflix, the kid on the bus, they're all talking. If you're not talking, then that's a problem. So, couple of pointers. For smaller children, there's a book called Good Pictures, Bad Pictures. And one of the things it recommends is the 3 T's. So what we say is, for a small child, is turn it off immediately, turn away, remove yourself, because one of the things they find is, you know that thing of you've looked and then it's almost human nature to look again, isn't it? Like if you drive past an accident, you know that you shouldn't look, but how many times do you go? Because human nature makes you look again. So if they turn away, so if they turn it off and they turn away, they remove themselves, they're less likely to go back for another look. Tell me about it. They need to know that they will not be in trouble if they tell you. They need to know that if they've seen something, they can come and tell you, and they're not going to get yelled at. You know, you might need to take a really deep breath, but they're not going to get yelled at. They can come and talk to you. And you might be thinking, well, I can't tell my 6-year-old that they might view pornography, because you might not want to use that word. I think that's okay. So these are some words that might help. So you might be talking to them about pictures that make you feel happy versus pictures that make you feel scared or confused. You might talk about pictures where people aren't wearing many clothes. It's normal, isn't it? I don't know if you've done this, but I remember a lot of conversations with my kids when they were little about wearing clothes. Yeah, especially outside the house. You know, and we say to them, you know, your body's lovely, but please wear pants when there are people around. You know, those kind of things. And it's the same kind of thing, that they need to know that their bodies are great. But, you know, we cover them up in public, and if they're looking at photos or anything online, anybody they were looking at should have things covered up as well. They need to know that they can talk to you. They also need to know that older children or adults should never show them this content. I've been surprised how many people have told me that when they were little, an older child showed them pornography. It happens a lot. And so if they know that that shouldn't happen, they know that if it does happen, they can come and tell you rather than being isolated with that information. I spoke to a girl recently in year 10 who'd been addicted to pornography since she was 8 years old. And she said that she bumped into it. I won't tell you about the scene she saw because, it did my head in. But she said that she was horrified but fascinated, and so she looked again. And so she'd been addicted since she was 8 years old. And she didn't look like one of those kind of girls. You know, you wouldn't notice on her that there was anything going on. And it was fantastic to be able to refer her, get her some help. But it can be anybody, it can be any child. If you haven't started the conversation, how do they know they can talk to you about it? If you haven't mentioned it, how do they know it's safe? So when it comes to talking to older kids about porn, We haven't got time for that. Here we go. Tips for talking to teenagers. Start 2 years earlier than you think you need to. So if you've thought, oh, well, I'll talk to them when they're 11, when they go to high school, take 2 years off that. Okay? That's a good sort of rule of thumb. Start small. You don't, how am I doing? Oh, Henry, I'm sorry. Have I got 5 more minutes? 2 more minutes. I'm going to talk really quickly. Start really, really small. You don't have to say the whole thing in one go. Avoid shame. Shame, everything in our lives that's shameful, things fester and hide in the dark. We need to get things out into the light. You know, the Bible talks about confessing your sins to one another, but even with them, you know, they need to not feel ashamed for any choices they might have made. It helps if you talk shoulder to shoulder. So the car's great because everybody's looking the same way. Or while you're doing a job, that works well. Often it's really helpful to say, have any of your friends seen, or are any of your friends talking about? You might well be talking about them, but by pushing it onto their mate, it's easier to think about. Listen as well as asking questions. Discussing boundaries, and think about your why. You know, why as a family do we have certain ideas? Because if they understand the why, it helps. Sending links and asking what they think. They're really good at looking at things online and talking to their friends with their thumbs, so make the most of that. Send them a link to something that you've seen. And then with your thumbs, what do you think? Because they're used to communicating like that. And it's a way of dropping things in and starting a conversation. You might not be able to walk through the kitchen and say the word pornography, but you can probably send them something and ask them what they think. And teach them to question. When you're watching films, even normal stuff, if you're watching anything as a family, question, why are they doing that? You know, what's that person after? What's happening? Get them to question. Okay, so, do you have any questions this evening?